You are listening to Aim Higher, a Catholic podcast designed to instruct and to encourage the daily practice of our faith. Pax et bonum, peace and good to you all. This is Aim Higher podcast. I'm Father Anthony.
And I'm Sister Catherine.
And
How are
today,
you, Father?
we're going to do a little bit of,
Just a little
some pleasantries.
pleasantries. Yes.
I am doing well. I am doing quite well. Things are being very productive lately.
You're taking advantage of the winter lull.
Yes, and the odd weather. Well, of course, I had some pretty nice warm weather. We're going out
Yeah, we didn't get
outside, inside would have made more sense. And here I am lugging a bunch of stuff, boxes of books from one location to another, doing all this stuff in 12-degree weather. And I'm like, well, you just got to move faster.
Mhm.
But no, kind of getting things situated. And the people know who like to, I would say redecorate, but rearrange. What do they call it? Their feng shui, but it's superstition. But it's like getting my balance. I'm like, well, no, wait a minute. I will hold it to this. Just rearranging things for the sake of doing it. I don't know. I mean, you definitely see a positive aspect to all of this, but
Mhm.
I'm like trying to rearrange things for more efficiency and
Functionality.
utilizing our space better. And things are going really well. And I'm trying to get it done before I have the visitors next month. When they have some of our fellow Catholics in Mexico coming up.
Okay, I was
Well,
wondering if that was actually going to happen.
yeah, it's happening,
Okay,
and it's
very
just,
good.
I need them to confirm how many because I don't wanna have, like I said, a whole family at my door, but, well, no, wait a minute, I asked for, like, 2 or 3, 'cause, coming up, 2 purposes. One, to visit,
Mhm.
um, many of them have not been, up here in Wisconsin, up in, Our Lady of the Rosary, but also to help with the project of painting the church.
Mhm.
So
So exciting.
we're getting a lot, planned out, lot set
Mhm.
up and want to get it done so then we can get to the next phase of getting the sanctuary all decorated. I'll just say
Yep, freshened up.
decorated,
Yep.
freshened up, or make more ornate.
Mhm.
And we have everything in place. It's just that everything now is a domino effect.
Mhm.
So
Oh, exciting.
I'm assuming gonna have maybe up to about 4 people staying with us here, so I have
Mhm.
to say, "Well, okay, let's, just get this arranged," and working with, Brother Thomas about, how to set things up, so it's going well.
Okay, really good.
I'm actually very, very pleased. It's one of those, and I wish I wasn't traveling next week in a way because I wanna get this done, but that's what's important,
It
and
could be helpful to even step away from your particular project to kind of rejuvenate the endeavor. Sometimes you
yeah,
do have to step away because it can get overwhelming and projects beget projects.
it has,
So
it
so
has.
it's
Yeah.
and that's I think why a lot of it's just like, maybe I won't change that because if I start doing that, then I'll want to do this. And well, there's nothing wrong with really improving things to maybe make things in your life more
Well,
efficient.
one of the bit of organizing is also happening. This is more rearranging is the basement of the church, and which has gone through quite a transformation in the last year. And I was bringing back some things that were there at one time that I brought over here, and using the filing cabinets to store things, and opening things up, and I'm breaking down the old shelving that we used to have here. I mean, at Our Lady of the Rosary, and we were in Milwaukee, and a lot of these shelves, just like 3 of them, busted up, gone. They're done. They were all worn out, and you know, finding out places to put the books and rearranging. Well, it was kind of funny. One of the ladies came to me. Was it last week or the week before? Because they see everything that's happening. Books are getting cleared off the shelves at church. It's like, Father, don't bust up these shelves at church right now because we have shelves put in that were built for the basement of the church, not freestanding particle board shelving. And they're like, Father, just don't throw these out. If you, we don't, people will take them. And I'm like, I'm not going to throw these out. What are you talking about? Why would I do that? These were made for here and it looks nice
Mhm.
down here. I was like, I'm not doing that. Of course, there was a table that we had there for a few years that I got rid of because it's just an awkward table and it just it looked like something from the 1960s and I wasn't really interested in keeping it. It was just there. It was cumbersome, not efficient. So now you see, only they asked me is how I was doing.
No, well, updates are good. I mean, well, it's kind of, this time of year, so this is
I
early
didn't
February.
ask you how you were doing. I
Oh,
said,
that's fair enough. Well,
all
but
this came from you ask me how I'm doing.
I wasn't
Now,
gonna
how are you doing?
I wasn't necessarily going to share how I was doing. I was just actually gonna validate all of your, may not all of your points, but some of your points. But now that you've, I'll still do it. It's okay. Uh, it's just, this time of year, this is early February, and we're kind of in that. I think everybody's just counting down till spring, Easter, if you will. And it's funny because I was thinking about how when I was younger, I really, really loved it when Easter was later. And I still
Mhm,
do to a point, but the problem is with a later Easter, it just feels like Lent is really long because for a lot of us, even right now, even before Septuagesima, which is today's topic, it almost feels like before Septuagesima, like almost, but fits right in because we're, Christmas is over, Christmas season is over, and we're all just kind of just trying to get by. And not like in a depressing way, but we're all just trying to figure out what's next, like what makes sense.
mhm,
What kind of renewal, if you will, are we really going to make happen within our, personal lives? And I don't
mhm,
know what's happening here, but um with our personal lives, but also more importantly our spiritual lives. But to your
mhm.
point, bringing up um reorganizing things does play into that. you know, you do need order in many ways so that you can have spiritual order. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah,
there's a
yeah.
difference between messy and lived in. I don't know how. I mean, we can't see my screen. You can't see me. I don't think. I
I
can't see
can't
me.
see you,
But
no.
I'll keep talking anyway. I mean, if this only ends up as an audio video, that's fine, but we'll just see what
Mm,
happens. I don't it doesn't look like I've lost connection. But anyway, there's a difference between things looking lived in and things looking messy or things being a mess. You know, don't want to live in
yeah,
filth. Well,
yeah,
I mean, even in the room I'm in right now, I have a lot of stuff all over the place. I am trying to organize to make sense, going through
yep.
all the sewing things so I can be more efficient with that. Those things are also so important, but it just, we get, I just decided that I'm going to make use of this time of year that tends to be a little dreary. Kind of like I'm not like I'm done with winter, although I'm just praying it's not going to snow this weekend. We've been out with the plow 3 times this week, and anyone who kinda knows me knows that that's not my, that's a new thing for me, and it's not my favorite. And, I just shovel, but I'll probably get in the plow if I need to. So, which
Mhm,
is a truck with a plow, lawn
mhm,
driveway. So,
mhm.
but we have a big old patch of ice right in front of the chapel, so I'm gonna have to, do the one thing Franciscans dread is to put salt down, but maybe if I put it down now by don't you dread salt on the sidewalks as a Franciscan walking barefoot?
Oh, that's how you mean it.
Yeah.
I just didn't really get what you meant by that. Okay.
Not sure what I was throwing down there. Um, this is kinda driving me batty that my camera's not working. Um, not sure why. And, so, just all those little things, but, we're less than a month now to Ash Wednesday, to
Yes.
Lent. I am looking forward to it. It's one of those things I kind of feel a lot of us maybe are more drawn to an earlier Lent because we're kinda done with the celebratory vibe that it is
Yeah.
that's going on, which is why I'm very grateful,
Uh,
segue coming, for the season of Septuagesima
well,
because
'cause
it's a pre-Lent.
is a bit of preparation for us and um, how we can make it a very spiritually profitable Lenten season.
Mhm.
And the time of Septuagesima is not a throwaway time, and neither is the time after Epiphany. If we understand the message, especially as contained in the epistles and the gospels on the Sunday of manifestation of Christ, of his working of miracles, of his divine mission, um, and then being presented with how this mission uh, was to culminate in his life, in his passion and death. At least at that point, cannot ultimately coming to its zenith, which is to supposed, which is to be on the last day when we are all judged, and for those entering into glory, that is uh, the ultimate end. But for us, to seeing how to prepare ourselves now for the Lenten season, um, as you said, transitioning from the celebratory atmosphere now to a penitential one. And the church, of course, does not just spring this upon you. She gradually works you into the penitential. Uh, and like you said, the season of Septuagesima. Now, the season of Septuagesima is only from Septuagesima Sunday, or you could say, excuse me, technically speaking, the Saturday at Vespers before Septuagesima Sunday, which this year, by the way, the 15th, Saturday the 15th. So Vespers, roughly around 6 p.m. But the 16th of February is the Sunday at Septuagesima. It begins the short season, which lasts until Ash Wednesday. And so it's about 2.5 weeks long, roughly. So it is 2.5 weeks of preparing ourselves for what this season, for the Lenten season. It is now to meant to direct our minds more to the penitential nature, and for us to consider what we now can do, um, or what we can do during Lent. Now, what we're going to use as a bit of a catalyst here. Uh, is Father Weiser's book, the Easter book. And he has a whole chapter here, pre Lent and Carnival. It is, well, I mean, it's not a horribly long chapter. Um, gonna read and we'll see how this goes, sister.
Sounds good,
Just
Father.
gonna take it right from the beginning. So, chapter 3, pre Lent and Carnival. The 3 Sundays preceding Lent are called Septuagesima, 70th, Sexagesima, 60th, and Quinquagesima, 50th. Actually, they are not the 70th, 60th, or 50th days before Easter, as their names would indicate. These titles seem to have been arbitrarily chosen for the sake of round numbers, in keeping with the much older term of Quadragesima, 40th, which denotes the first Sunday of Lent. The preparatory time of pre Lent was established by the practice of the Greek church, which started its great fast earlier than the Roman church did. We find the pre-Lenten Sundays mentioned as early as 541 in the Fourth Council of Orleans. At the time of Pope Gregory I, 604, they were already celebrated in Rome with the same liturgical mass texts that are used today. The spirit of pre-Lent is one of penance, devotion, and atonement. The Sunday masses and liturgical rules reflecting this character. The Gloria is omitted. Purple vestments are worn. The altar may no longer be decorated with flowers. Um, I guess I'll just make my own little comment here right away. Yes, so it's not exactly the 70th day, the
Mhm.
60th day, or the 50th day, but it signifies the old practice that other like especially churches in the East had beginning Lent a little earlier. So it harkens back to that time and how it's connected with the liturgical, or could you say the Latin term for Lent, which is Quadragesima. It's a way of simplification and explanation.
Mhm.
Uh, Now, already, as they say, this was an ancient custom, and its purpose is the transition to a more penitential devotion. To continue, in ancient times, when the laws of abstinence was much stricter and included many other foods besides meat, the clergy and a good number of the laity started abstaining progressively during the pre-Lenten season until they entered the complete fast on Ash Wednesday. After Quinquagesima, that is, the last Sunday before Lent, this voluntary fast began with abstinence from meat. Consequently, this Sunday was called Dominica Carnevala, farewell to meat Sunday, from which comes the word carnival, another more scholarly explanation of the derivation of a carnival is that it comes from the Latin carnem levare, or carnolevarium, which means withdrawal or removal of meat.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah,
The more you know.
the more you know. Yeah, the etymology of it is quite interesting.
It
And
it's just funny when you think of this is what I love about Latin and, the more you start to realize as you follow along in the missal, like, within, like, the epistles and gospels, and you're looking at both sides, you can see how some words are very clearly this word, in
Mhm,
English. It's a lot
mhm.
of fun, so just kinda thinking about how the word carnival and what it means and how, in today's world, people go to carnivals, and they're probably not even thinking about what the word carnival actually means.
Yeah, yeah,
The school has a
especially when
carnival.
you consider how many people eat meat at
Meat on a
carnivals.
stick. Meat
Meat
on
on
a
a
stick.
stick, deep
All
fried.
sorts of meat.
You're
Yeah.
supposed to withdraw from meat, and but of course the explanation of that will be given. Uh the thing that kind of stood out to me is that uh, the idea that Christians from centuries past understood um, how to you're building yourself up to that fast, and you're preparing yourself for it because it is really a, especially back then, it was not just meat, but various other things they were allowed to have. Many of them, their meals were just water and bread. Of course, a much more nutritious bread.
And
One
better
of the
water.
reasons, yeah, better water. One of the reasons why pretzels was invented as a Lenten food.
Um,
Um, it, but to gradually work your way up to that by eliminating things bit by bit. Um, it
But you
it
also
it re
it,
seems healthy way of doing it.
but also you think about, back before modern times when we had, when refrigeration or even going to the grocery store
Mm,
was something that people also had to consider that they had to put up certain things to prepare, also to process and preserve
yeah,
the meats. I mean, and I guess probably when you really think about it, this season happens before the spring, so you're probably, you're probably in those days you're long past processing your meats that you're going to eat. And
mhm,
you're probably very close to maybe even cleaning out your storage.
mhm,
Because you're gonna prepare cattle throughout the upcoming season. Because I believe a lot of that stuff happens more in the fall. Um
mhm,
and same with, like, the vegetables, and then it's a great time to purge, all the things that you canned,
mhm,
um, which, a lot of us take for granted, not necessarily just the process, but like, "Oh, well, I don't feel like that right now, that I'll go get what I actually want instead of but this is something that you have."
mhm,
And maybe you can kind of bring some of that into today's times is instead of, maybe take a serious look at your pantry, take a serious look at your freezer, make this season's like, let's really clean this out. Let's, don't eat anything expired that's gone bad. But for many of us,
mhm,
how is that really
mhm.
I mean, I suppose it can happen. I mean, I know
Yeah,
some people, if you get a deep freezer, you just keep putting more and more stuff on top and you forget what's in there. It's like, well, that's actually a problem if you think about it. Like if that keeps happening, that's something you probably should consider rectifying because you forget about something that spoils, you're wasting food. And I know
yeah,
for a lot of us, wasting food was a big deal. And now we're
mhm,
kind of indifferent to it in many ways.
yeah,
So maybe this is a time to kind of hearken that mentality is like, take a look at your pantry. What's been sitting there that you haven't made because you just weren't in the mood for, or you didn't have
yeah,
time for, and clean that up. You'll feel a lot better. You'll then defrost your freezer and then replenish it as the season brightens up.
mhm,
I don't know. That just kind of came to me because I mean I'm very and it's probably just well, but you have a smaller group, you're more conscientious of what you have. But
mhm,
I think I'm pretty well aware of everything that is in our pantry, which isn't, a lot, and our freezer. And I'm not saying it's not a lot because we're struggling. We're definitely not struggling, but it's just I want to make sure we eat what we have. Um,
yeah,
and it because and to also store up food, like buying in bulk, it only saves you money if you're going to use it. If you're gonna throw away, you definitely have not saved money. But also as Franciscans, we don't buy a lot in bulk in that way because it's not trusting in God's providence. And, so we have to take that a little bit more seriously as religious, but that is something that the laity
yeah,
could adopt. I mean, I know that, people were post-COVID, maybe a little afraid of that they might run out of toilet paper. It's like, yeah, have some backup, but you don't need your basement lined with shelves, with all sorts of canned goods, that, because I know that there's advertisers for things that will, all you have to do is add water and they'll keep for 20 years. I think I'm not saying it's wrong, but I just think as Catholics, maybe that's really not a good approach. And let's be honest, how many people are
yeah.
actually still eating those things? You know what I mean?
Well, it's just you mentioned I'll bring this up, then we'll move on, but I love the points you're making because they're very practical, and it's connecting our spiritual growth with what we do each and every day. Because remember, our spirituality takes in the whole man and you know, body and soul. And having that organization and sort of embracing what we know we call into society kind of the minimalist mentality in a way,
Mhm.
especially in food and what we use, and we find out that hey, I didn't need this, I don't really have to have this on hand all the time, and it makes things that we have, like we talk about like sweets and such, more special for an occasion of celebration. But you brought up like foods. In my organizing and cleaning things out and restoring in different spaces, kind of using my space better. I knew it was there, so I can't say I found it and I discovered it, but I was reminded of these survival packs of food that good dearly departed brother John, who originally owned this building,
Mm.
had. And, various different foods and what was like meatloaf. Of course, I didn't see the carb option, but he was diabetic and he took care of his health pretty well. So he probably steered clear of that. And I'm just looking at this going, I am so curious how this tastes. And it's been sitting there. And it wasn't bad. It was like you open up like a like one of those tuna packs.
Okay.
Took a little more. I thought I could just rip it clean, but I had to cut it. And there's a meatloaf patty and uh and gravy in it. And I was like, okay. I was like, this wasn't bad.
Hmm.
It's not something I'd want to um eat all the time because there's probably some amount of processing to it. But
Hmm.
if you needed to eat and you had a ration, it's a pretty nice option to have. And you can eat it right out of the bag. You don't necessarily have to warm it up.
But but you have that as that was a carryover, but, that's not something
Yeah.
you're going to invest in. And I'm
Yeah.
not and this is
Yeah.
not to shame people that felt drawn to do such things, but also just to kind of realize, but then it's just sitting there. Um, I mean,
Well,
it wor
there's a bit of disaster prep that has to take place. And
sure, sure,
we,
absolutely. I mean, it's even we just placed an order for more paper, um, and it's just, the bishop calculated how much more paper he was gonna need for how many serifs and just a few extra. Now, granted, we probably if we would ordered more, maybe would have saved more money, but that's finding place for it. But also,
yeah.
what if for whatever reason we don't run the serif after this year?
Yeah.
Then that's paper just sitting there.
Yeah. Like,
And I'm not
what if
saying that's
something
going to
happened?
happen.
Yeah.
I'm not
But
gonna say
I get what you mean.
it's just there's only so much really logic to it.
Well,
Um,
it was like the envelopes that I have printed that I use for paying bills and such, which have our address and everything information. Father Bernard did it for years, but he got the bulk, so to save money. But this big old box, store it somewhere, and unfortunately, where he kept it, I don't think he realized it. I think he eventually did. Was that the glue would start sticking because the dampness where it was kept. So some of these things that got to the end of it, these things were all ripped up, and you had to cut them and tape them up in order to use them. And I got a guy in Port Washington. He prints it up, and I get 2 or 3 boxes at a time, and
mhm,
it usually lasts me about a year.
mhm.
You know,
Well, and then you're supporting a local business. So,
yeah,
sometimes, like, as I just pointed out, buying in a large quantity, if you're not gonna use it and it gets thrown away, you did not save money. So it's just maybe just taking this opportunity to really look and, like I said, check your pantry. Maybe spend this Lent, we're gonna clean out our pantry. Let's get creative. The thing is there's so many, things out there that you could type in what ingredients you have and find a recipe. So this or get creative on your own. I mean, there's
it, it
once you know the basics of how to make soup,
yeah,
you could throw down a soup together very easily with whatever
yeah,
you have on hand, which is I'm grateful our parents taught us that skill of
mhm,
working with what you have.
mhm.
And so I just this all just came to my mind as you're
Well,
talking about it, but
it like I said, like, it all goes together, and to kind of using the season because you just got done, with the celebratory seasons of Christmas and New Year's, and you have probably more stuff and, decorations you're taking down and doing all these things, and now you're trying to get back to a certain amount of regularity in your life, but adding on to that, it's like, well, we can use this time that's meant for spiritual preparation, but also using it as a focus for getting our material things in order. Why do you think we have the idea of spring cleaning?
Uh-huh.
One of the customs that you have during Holy Week was this cleaning. Like it was Holy Thursday for families in Europe would that would be a day where you would really focus upon cleaning your house, the deep
Uh-huh.
cleaning and making sure the idea was to make sure everything was in right order for Easter Sunday. And even more importantly, the celebration of the entirety of Holy Week.
Uh-huh. So that you
That
could be
you yeah, so you can focus
participate.
upon the spiritual stuff, like you prepare yourself. And now that since we have refrigeration, we have a lot of these means of being able to keep things, maybe you can take like a Monday or something in Holy Week and you prepare all your meals, get everything set ready to go so you don't have to worry about that aspect, you know. Um and making it something that's easy and you warm it up for the family and then you're able to focus more upon spiritual activities, not just going to church but things you can do at home. So a little bit of prep time can go a long way.
Yeah, so this way you could actually really make your home the domestic church that they like
Yeah.
really because the more we have, I was just reading one of my current reads is A Way to Happiness by Bishop Sheen, which I think I brought up, but
Mm.
I was just reading a chapter about our attachment to things and it brought up, you give a child one toy and that's the only toy he has. There's always a fear, well, they're going to get bored, but if that's all he has, he's either going to find a way to appreciate it and make more of it, but buying more isn't going to make you're just going to become more and more bored, more and more restless. And he brought up how adults are we're the same way. We keep thinking things are going these material things are going to make us happier and better. And there are things that can do that to a degree.
Mhm.
But all these advancements in technology is supposed to take our hands off of a lot of things, and yet we're filling our time um worse. You would
Mhm.
think we'd have more time for the spiritual, but because of all these advancements, we're um we're finding less time for some reason. Not sure
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's
entertainment
that's
does that as well.
right. That is true. And that also can be something that to really reflect on this season, and I think a lot of families do that. But
Yeah.
but just to consider if you really do clean out your closets, clean out your cabinets, really and then start anew, that could be really exciting. And then
Mhm.
what's beautiful about the season is you get into spring and you're gonna start seeing this outside rejuvenate in that way. The outside is no longer sleeping. You're going to see the wake up of outside. Don't you also want to, take the time? You see, the thing is, when I say rest during the winter, I don't mean, like the hibernation sleep, rest in the sense that you prepare yourself to spring forward in that season so that you can really dive into those things you really want to do, that
Yeah.
things that really get you excited about the longer days. I mean, even now, I I notice that the days are lighter, longer, and it's very exciting. Um, and but at the same time, I do kind of like when it gets darker earlier because I'm usually ready to sleep pretty early. But you know, we can appreciate that more in properly preparing for it, and maybe some purging. We need to shed off that old coat that's holding us back, you
Mhm.
know? You know, we
Yeah.
eventually, like, that heavy blanket that you're cuddled up with is not gonna feel right, and where will you be with that, you know? Um, I don't know really where I was going with that, but
I you started off strong with the analogy, I was following you, but, say, like, your winter, your winter blanket that you were using by the end of winter, probably before that, you're not going to be using it because it's going to get warmer,
It's gonna
but
get in your way.
it's going to get in your way, and you're going to need to get it, clean it and store it for the next winter. Anyway, started off pretty well.
I
Um,
am story of my
okay,
life.
I'll continue with Father Weiser here a bit. Or you got I mean, it sounds like you got your point across, sister, and
I
excellent
think
point.
so.
Yeah,
I mean,
it sounds good to me.
you're not gonna carry around that blanket. You know, realistically, that's just gonna hold you back. You know, we're supposed to.
If if Linus from the Peanuts taught us anything, but you know what? He used that blanket in many clever ways, though.
But speaking of Linus and his blanket, in the, Charlie Brown Christmas, when Linus goes to give us the gospel story of the nativity, he
Mhm.
drops his blanket. So he even then, you know, that's a sign that when we really look towards God, all those things that we're attached to have no bearing. And that I saw that online a couple years ago, but people pointed that out, and I was like, "Wow."
Makes a lot of
So
sense,
just
yeah.
so yeah, look to see what's holding you back
Lights,
from.
please.
I like that movie.
Alright, continue with Father Weiser. The Oriental Church, too, abstained first from meat, but began on Sexagesima, the second Sunday before Lent, which is called meatless, like Meatless Sunday. With Quinquagesima, the Eastern Church began, and still begins, the abstinence from butter, cheese, milk, eggs. Thus, in Eastern Europe, the day is called Cheeseless Sunday.
Mhm.
In preparation for Lent, the faithful in medieval times used to go to confession on Tuesday before Ash Wednesday. From this practice, the day became known as Shrove Tuesday, day on which people were shriven from sins. An old English sermon of the 11th century exhorts the faithful thus: In the week immediately before Lent, everyone shall go to his confessor, and his confessor shall so shrive him uh, as he may hear. Sorry, shall so shrive him as he then may hear by his deeds what he is to do. A worldly aspect of pre Lent is the familiar celebration known since medieval times by the term carnival. Carnival celebrations are still held in Central Europe and among the Latin nations of Europe and America. The German word for this time of celebration, Fastnacht or Fasching, comes from the ancient Vasen, which means running around crazily, and was adopted by the Slavic nations and by the Hungarians. Another German word of later origin is Fastnacht, Eve of the Fast. The Lithuanians call this season Uzgavėnes, pre-Lent. I do not know if my pronunciation is good, but we'll go with that. What is the origin of modern carnival celebration? The name, as the name indicate, as the names indicate, excuse me, there are various causes, but the primary reason for this sort of carnival is the feasting, rejoicing, and reveling preceding the imminent season of fast and abstinence. It is a trait of human nature to anticipate approaching privations by greater or lesser excesses. The intensity of this urge, however, should not be judged to stem from the mild Lenten laws of today, but from the strict and harsh observance of ancient times, which makes modern man shiver at the mere knowledge of its details. No wonder the good people of past centuries felt entitled to have a good time before they started on their awesome fast. Another reason for feasting, and a very practical one, was the necessity for, finishing those foods which could not be eaten during Lent, and which, in fact, could not even be kept in homes during the fast: meat, butter, cheese, milk, eggs, fats, and bacon. This meant an increase in consumption of rich foods and pastries the week before Ash Wednesday, hence have come the names Fat Tuesday, Vetterdienstag in German, or Mardi Gras in French, Butter Week in Russia and other Slavic countries, and Fat Days in Poland.
Right to the point.
Yeah. In the northern countries of England, the Monday of Carnival week is called Collop Monday, from the Latin colpones, cut pieces. Collops are eaten in every house and consist of sliced meat or bacon mixed with eggs and fried in butter. Love the sound of that. In Scotland, people eat crowdie. Crowdie, I guess that's how you'd say it. A kind of porridge cooked with butter and milk. On Tuesday, England on Tuesday, England enjoys her famous Shrove Tuesday pancakes. The Germans have pastries called Fastnachtstollen, and the Austrians Faschingskrampfen. All right.
Fair.
Uh, Fastenlavsobrer are sold in Norway with great quantities during carnival time. Resembling our muffins, these boilers are sold throughout the whole year plain, but at carnival, they are filled with whipped cream coated with sugar and frosting. Quinquagesima Sunday is there called Fastenlaven Sonntag. Okay, that's awesome. Fastenlaven Sonntag. Of the northern countries, Russia, before the present regime, attached a national and strict regulated importance to the several seasons of Carnival, Lent, and Easter. Carnival or Butter Week was a general holiday. As in Western cultures, there are pre Christian relics in the Russian festival too, but these relics often present an extraordinary blending of Scandinavian and Asiatic myths. In the country districts, a fantastic figure called Masli. Okay, let's do this. Maslianitsa, butter goddess, is gaily decorated and driven about on a sled while the peasants sing special songs and horovoded folk choruses. At the end of the week, it is burned, and a formal farewell is bidden to pleasure until Easter. So goodbye, pleasure. Goodbye, butter. Rich but unsweetened pancakes, blini, are served in every household at carnival time. All
It's
right, pancakes.
I'm kind of it's interesting as you're reading all that. It's like, wow, this is just some of that's absolutely crazy. But he made a point. There are pre-Christian, customs. Obviously the um this whole butter goddess, that's not a Christian practice.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I
uh,
mean, maybe like they maybe change it, like maybe the butter maiden or something, and
sure.
who knows what variations they would have give, but to keeping kind of the tradition alive, I suppose.
Butter
It's
week.
interesting. It is. It's just we've talked about this before, and just how much your Catholic life was just part of your daily life, and the
Mhm.
customs that they had reflected the various seasons in the liturgical year, and all these celebrations stemmed from that. And it just when we are just so used to, well, pretty much having um, Christmas and Easter stand out as big celebratory times. Of course, in this country, we have a few others. Um, there were celebrations all the time, holy days that were kept, and
Mhm.
customs
Feast
that were
days.
maintained, feast days, and it's just see how this just grew and just a part of the daily of just daily life. And we talk about practical and also just inspiring, and
Mhm.
it can be. This is why we are encouraged to embrace a lot of these type of customs mentalities, not as a novelty, but as a practical tool of drawing ourselves closer to God, being really in that way more spiritually minded.
Mhm.
So I'm liking that, and of course, as we're going over all these different foods that you have, and one thing that I'm reminded, and it's not mentioned in here, but is the I'm not sure if it's strict like Poland, but I mean there are other places in Europe, uh, and it's a famous, very popular, I should say, um, dessert in Wisconsin, which would is punchkas, uh, which is basically a jelly filled sugar donut.
Well, and I do believe, like, I have to look up for sure, but I believe the traditional filling is prune.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and, I don't think I've ever had them. I always, of course, I don't know if I ever noticed them here, but every time I've been in Wisconsin, they're always out. I'm like, "Oh, those look really good." Actually, I think you bought some last year, and we
Mhm.
had them. Um, I think last year, because I was in Wisconsin, we did kind of make, the Tuesday before Lent a little bit, you know, feast before fast, but not getting carried away, obviously. But I can't really think that I ever put too much mention here. Um, it's just, not a whole lot changes for us food wise when Lent comes around. Ultimately, um, I don't think it's very often we'd have meat more than once a day, anyhow. So, and we generally only eat twice a day, so it's kind of like, okay, just kind of just there is still like a shift, but I guess all that to just kind of say that you find more and more as you progress that there is a huge benefit to kind of looking into how what you consume, not necessarily just food wise, but how that impacts your day. I mean, I know for families, they always have to think about the meals, and you've got kids involved, and it can be very time consuming. I mean, kitchen work is very time consuming, even for the little that we have. There's still a bulk of my time is spent in the kitchen.
Mhm.
This is why I like soup season, because you can just make a big old pot of soup and be done for a few days. Uh,
Mhm.
so it's almost like for many of us, and I'm not saying that this is something that every Catholic should take away coming out of the Lenten season, but they're because we should really embrace the joys of Easter, but there's still something to be had with the s- the emphasis on sacrifice throughout the year, which is why I'm very grateful, on Fridays we don't eat meat throughout the year. That's not the case in the Modernist church, and I
Mhm.
feel sorry for them that's they're missing out, just as they actually don't have the Septuagesima season in their liturgical calendar, which I think we're gonna, at some point, talk about some of the differences there. But, it just makes me sad because the church in its wisdom put these things in place so that we really didn't have to think about it, but that we could just do and improve upon. I mean, and I know for a lot of people, it's like, well, they took away the Friday abstinence and made it so that we choose our own penance. Like, but are you gonna really do that well? Maybe some of us, but I'd rather have that figured out and then build around that. Like, have that be
There
my base, and then find ways to really connect with it spiritually and to make it even more sacrificial to some degree.
a deeper understanding of the obedience attached to it,
Mhm.
and plays a huge part because, as we know, especially as being religious, being Franciscan, that you add obedience to any act, it makes it supernaturally meritorious.
Yep.
You know,
And
it's I remember Bishop Lewis explaining that, and you know, you let's say you see this a pin on the ground and you pick it up. Well, that is morally, it's an amoral act. It's neither good or bad. But if you were told by your superior, I want you to go pick that up, now it makes it supernaturally meritorious for you.
Mhm.
Like,
Yep.
also on the other end of the spectrum, if you were told, I don't want you doing that, and you do it, well, now you've just committed the sin of disobedience
Yep.
just for doing something very what
Yep.
we would consider very small. And there are people, when they don't understand how the spirituality works, they would say, well, oh, it why is that a sin? It's just a little thing. It's like, yes, it is a little thing, but the obedience is a great thing. And that's when you go to the sin of Adam and Eve, it goes back to that.
I was thinking, yep.
Adam and Eve. It's like all they did was eat a fruit off a tree, but it was the obedience attached to it
Yep. Oh,
is what's
I
important. And that's what we gotta look upon. That's what we gotta focus upon here.
the sooner we really strive to understand obedience, its beauty, we can realize how truly wonderfully awesome it is. Um,
Mhm.
and it goes back to a quote, and I know I've brought it up before on the podcast, but it's one I have saved because it's from my patron, St. Catherine of Bologna. Without a doubt, obedience is more meritorious than any other penance. And what greater penance can there be than keeping one's will continually submissive and obedient? And so it's just, we should all be grateful that there is someone in our lives that we do owe obedience to for well, most of us, if not all of us,
Mhm.
your spiritual father, your pastor, especially in any counsel he gives you in confession. Trust what he tells you, and if you obey, you can't go wrong. Many of us have an employer. You're bound to obey your employer. And it's obeying everything except sin. So, I mean, ultimately, you probably won't really have to dive into too many like moral conflicts, I would hope. Children to their parents. I mean, and we all want to push boundaries. I think naturally we feel inclined to, but there is something to not always having to have to decide everything
Mhm.
yourself.
Yep.
And the sooner you embrace that, I saw on social media, and this woman had gotten a lot of flack from people who truly don't understand, but she she posted about how she is really striving to recognize her husband's role as head of the household. And I know a lot of people sometimes get a little wonkadoodle on the whole, be submissive to your husbands, but there's and I know we've talked about that before. It's like, yes, you should obey your husband, and but husbands are supposed to also love you as Christ loved his church. It's not just like, you always have to do exactly what your husband says. It's, you're supposed to be a united front. You're supposed to work together. That's what works. But she was sharing how, because she's such a planner and she has a hard time saying no and will agree to do things that pushes her beyond her limits. So she decided that when it comes to even not everything, a lot of things, she will say, "Let me check with my husband, ask him about it." More or less ask his permission and then go from there. And I mean, of course, people blew up on her on that because it sounds, archaic to some people, but she pointed out that going to my husband, getting his opinion free frees me from my need to please people all the time. I tend to overschedule, and then I also don't take in consideration what he might need to do, like, trying to connect in that way. And, is she he'll think about it more and see, "Is this something that you actually need to do right now? Or maybe can we do this later?" And I know not every relationship's gonna work that way, but this is something that they've been working toward for years. They've been married a long time, but she
Yeah.
just realized that she also just needs someone to help her. They're raising 4 kids. He's actually, because he's in the military, he's not there all the time. So a lot falls
Yeah.
on her.
Yeah.
And I thought it was very beautiful. So, even for me, there's a lot of things like I have assumed permission to do for as far as errands, but there are things that I will still go back and ask the bishop for permission on, even though I know he's given it before, because I don't wanna take advantage, or I don't want to, like, trust my judgment too much or interpret or, working around in my brain where I can think it's okay.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with checking in with other people to maybe
Yeah.
and you can do that even as a non-married person or a non-religious, just to a close friend. Like, let's just say you are feeling overwhelmed with your schedule for whatever reason, but you can't clearly see why. Talk to your friend about it and say, what do you think would make sense? You're not asking your friends permission to, do this or that, but you're asking them to be a true friend and help me see where maybe I'm letting my own self down. So that's I guess my little I don't know, psychological. I'm not trained in psychology. I just find it fascinating.
Yep. Alright. Thank you.
Maybe I'll edit all that out.
Don't you dare.
Okay.
Don't you
Yes,
dare.
Father. Yes, Father.
It's a natural conversation, or
It
it's
is.
trying to
It's
be.
if it's
Um,
trying.
alright, since Carnival, continuing on with Father Weiser, was a time of feasting and reveling, it was only natural that many elements of pre-Christian spring lore should have become part of the celebration. Lent excluded the boisterous practices of mumming and masquerading, so what better time could be found for it than the gay days of Carnival? All the familiar features of modern carnival celebrations are firmly rooted in a tradition that actually dates from about the 14th century. It has often been claimed that the pre Christian element of the carnival frolics is a growth of the revels of the Roman Saturnalia, a pagan feast in honor of the field god Saturnus, held annually in December. It is true that the Saturnalia contain some features similar to our carnival. This similarity, however, is no proof of direct connection, but both festivals, independent of each other, could have adopted customs and rites from much older Indo European spring lore. In fact, modern research reveals that the pre Christian parts of the carnival celebration have come down to us through the folklore of the Germanic and Slavic races rather than from Greece or Rome. The popes, as temporal rulers of their state, acknowledged the carnival practice in Rome by regulating its observance, correcting its abuses, and providing entertainment for the masses. Paul II, 1471, started the famous horse races, which gave the name Corso to one of the Romans' ancient streets, and the former Via Lata, Broad Street. He also introduced the carnival pageants for which the Holy City was famous. Within the past few centuries, other cities too have developed their own special features of carnival celebration, like the famed Carnival of Cologne, the Parade of Gondolas in Venice, the Carnival Balls of Vienna, the floats and parades in the cities in South America, and the Murmurs Parade in Philadelphia. Best known celebration of Carnival in America is the famous Mardi Gras in New Orleans, which takes its name from the day on which it is annually held. Similar celebrations are also held on that day in other cities and towns of Louisiana, Florida, and Alabama. In the last state, in several cities of Florida and Louisiana, including New Orleans, the day is a legal holiday. It cannot be said, perhaps, that the participants in these revelries make up for their excesses by anything like the ancient or even the modern fasts and penance during the Lenten season, which begins on the next day, Ash Wednesday. A detailed description of Carnival, both ancient and modern, would fill a volume. What could easily be a good time be a time of good-natured and harmless enjoyment, unfortunately, has been turned by many into a wild orgy of eating, drinking, and other excesses. The carnival celebrations of modern big cities have not improved the standard of the Dark Ages, quote unquote, very much. At a recent carnival in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, 17 people died in street fights and other accidents, and 5,000 persons required medical treatment for injuries received. For years, civic and religious authorities have fought this trend, generally to little effect. Pope Pius V, 1590, imposed harsh punishments on offenders during the carnival seasons in Rome. He went so far as to erect whipping posts in conspicuous places as a caution and a warning. In the city of Vienna, it was found necessary in 1654 to issue a municipal edict carrying the threat of arrest and heavy fines for uh, lascivious behavior and the carrying of weapons at carnival time. Such prohibitions had to be repeated almost every year during the 17th and 18th centuries until finally the carnival masquerades were completely suppressed in the streets of the Austrian capital and only allowed as indoor amusements at the carnival balls where people danced to the strands of Johann Strauss's waltzes. In order to offset the many scandals committed carnival time, Pope Benedict the 14th in 1748 instituted a special devotion for the 3 days preceding Lent called the 40 Hours of Carnival, which is held in many churches of Europe and America in places where carnival frolics are of general and long standing tradition. That ends it, and I'm really glad he really kinda touched upon, the abuses that
Mhm.
from it because, I mean, those really stand out nowadays,
Yeah.
especially when you see things of Mardi Gras, and you see, unfortunately, like, many kind of different pictures and such. So, I mean, celebrations and pictures you see of these celebrations or videos,
Mhm.
and it's sad.
Mhm.
But what began as a simple act of practicality and finishing up certain foods, a certain enjoyment, a certain innocent merrymaking, uh,
Mhm.
to prepare yourself for the Lenten season, was really uh, blown out of the water. And there's actually, I think it's in the next chapter of that book when he talks about Ash Wednesday and kind of someone's reaction to what they saw. I'll get into that another time. But for us, we have to look at it in its entire context
Mhm.
and just look at the fallen human nature of man, the concept of you give an inch, they take a mile. Okay,
Mhm.
look at the type of enjoyments you can have that are proper. For us, a lot of it is like, okay, I don't go to this basketball game during the Lenten season. Maybe, I'm gonna go to one like the week before or some kind of other enjoyment before it happens, or, you know, going to a show, going to a concert, during this Lenten season, avoiding all of that
Mhm.
and, maybe, purposely doing something like that. Um, Food is another thing.
Just a reminder that that counts. Just you might
Yeah.
think, well, because yes, while going to these things during this season is not sinful, provided that it's not a
Mhm.
sinful outing,
Of course.
but just because it wouldn't be a sin doesn't mean it will still to forego it wouldn't have
Yeah.
an impact, you know?
Consider the spiritual benefit, and
Mhm.
we and you go to that obedience. You go to the right intention, and, look to if you wanna look, using this Septuagesima season as a time of preparation to make this a good Lent, it it really, I lost my thought there. It's really, something we should take advantage of, to utilize, to help us grow closer and closer to God spiritually. And, when we think about the biblical references given during Septuagesima season, we're focusing upon, Adam and Eve. We're focusing upon, um, uh, Noah and Abraham. And, we think about the Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, how they had everything they could have wanted or needed, and yet they had, fallen, and what they had to do. Well, now they had to work. They had to work, towards, pleasing God, in the world in a different way. Noah, the one just man in the ark, um, you know, closing himself up from the world in order to be more pleasing to God. And you take Abraham, so much about Abraham, um, makes us think about, the Lenten season, but I think most, the stark, um, example is the sacrificing of his son Isaac going up to the mountain, because it reminds us of, and it's a type of the sacrifice of Christ and the obedience that's required. So these are brought up, biblical references. We have that in divine office to make us really consider, the act of redemption as a whole. And we are all taking part in the working works of the redemption, and utilizing these holy seasons to our spiritual advantage to grow closer and closer to God. So each year, we're not having to take, we taking a step back and hopefully, two steps back and hopefully just a step forward, and doing that year in and year out, but each year gradually drawing ourselves closer and closer to God. And with each Lenten season, growing in meaning for us. It has a deeper impact for us
Yeah.
each and every year,
Definitely.
and
Definitely.
that is what we all have to look to aspire to. And we have to. This is why we have to keep God in our minds, in our hearts, in our homes, and how important that is. And these seasons help to remind us and prepare, for the spiritual combat that we all are engaged in while we are on this side of eternity. Anything else from you, sister?
I mean,
'Cause I think I said all I need to say.
that really felt like an amen. So
A good conclusion? Okay, very
I
good.
think so. I know you have to get going to offer mass
Yeah,
this morning. So
yeah.
I
So, well, with that said, I'll say Deo gracias, sister.
Deo gratias, Father.